All right, hello everyone. This is Kendra Watkins, and this is our second installment of ASUN Teammates. And ASUN Teammates is a video series on race relations in America, where we sit down with our campus delegates in the ASUN and have real discussions about race, inequality, and injustice, while we strive to make a positive impact on this movement. And joining with me today, I have members from our conference, and Lauren Seavis here. How are you doing today?
Doing quite well. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for taking time out of your day and actually being on the call. Like, I definitely am happy to have you. And also I have Lipscomb's head basketball coach for women's basketball, Lauren Sumsky. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me as well.
All right, thank you for joining me. And also new to the conference, I have Tasia Jeffries from Bellarmine University women's basketball. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Really excited to be talking about this today.
All right, really excited to be talking about it. All right, let's do it. I'm ready to jump into it. I'm actually glad to have you guys. I'm really enthused about just being able to learn because today I just wanted to talk about, like we're talking about race relations and social inequality, but more so I wanted to talk about the whole topic from a woman's standpoint. I know just when protests were going on and everything, one thing that really hit home with me was it was a quote, like it's been dominating social media and just headlines of something that Malcolm X said when he was like, the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman. And I wanted to definitely, for this particular panel, have Black women on because I wanted to learn and I wanted to just hear more from your viewpoint or your vantage point, especially in college athletics. What does that quote mean to you and how does it work in your job, Phil? If any, Lauren Seavis, I will ask you first.
I appreciate that question. It's extremely interesting. I'm actually rereading a book. It's called The Memo, and it's about women of color having a seat at the table and maintaining it. And I've actually just recommended it now to about 5 student athletes and several colleagues. And it sort of capitalizes on exactly what you say, right? It's one thing when you see me, you recognize the fact that I'm Black, and then it's another thing that I now have to explain being a Black female at the table in a hegemonic masculine society. I'll use that a lot solely because of the fact that that's my research interest in my doctoral program, so I'm all about it, women's advancement. And it's twofold, right? When you're reading books these days and you're listening to the literature and you see people speaking at graduations, right? The first person you see is a white male. After the white male, they feel like they're outreaching, right? When they can get the Black male. And then afterwards, you then see yourself with having a white female. When you're looking at leadership books right now being written, they're being written by white men and white women speaking on behalf of groups in which are underrepresented that they no longer can have the voice to speak to. So when I hear the words like neglected and not listened to, and Malcolm X, I have several books actually over here by him on my wall, is that you're speaking to a group of individuals who are thoroughly marginalized. When you look at Fortune 500 companies, less than 4% of executive senior staff members are Black women. However, Black women make up the larger percentage of educated Americans in today's society. So to Malcolm X's point, you wonder, where is the lack of correlation, right? Where is the issue where we're overly educated, but we're making up less than 4%? So I'll make sure to not harp too long on it. I want my counterparts and colleagues to be able to speak here, but I hope that resonates with listeners on your call today, is that where is the disconnect? Because as you look at all of the resumes and all of the descriptions of ADs, right? We're speaking to athletics specifically, to ADs. More female ADs have doctorates and PhDs than their male counterparts, yet less than 11% in Power 5 are made up of women, and only 2 of which are Black females. So like I said, I can go on and on about this all day and give you statistics, but I want to make sure I give Coach and our student athlete on the call here some time to speak to it.
Awesome. I'm all about these stats. So Coach Sumsky, I'm going to throw it to you. Just tell me, what does that quote mean to you? And just, go into it.
Deputy AD here. That's a tough act to follow, but yeah, I mean, I think it just speaks to I've taken 2 head coaching positions in both places. I've been the first female and the first Black female and the first head coach of color at those respective institutions. And we're in 2020. Like, it's crazy. We have all this technology that can do all these things, and you see all this advancement in all these other fields, except for in college athletics, which we know is made up mostly of student athletes of color. So for them not to have anyone that they can relate to and see people in those places and not have that sense of representation, you start to feel marginalized in some senses and start to see those ceilings. And what we are trying to do here, and I think what you guys are trying to do here in the ASUN, is break a lot of those glass ceilings. So I'm just excited to be a part. But yeah, it's just, I think Lauren covered a whole lot of it, but I think it just speaks to where we are right now. It is not necessarily representative of the talent that Black women in particularly can provide to our society as a whole.
All right, and Ms. Jeffries, just tell me, how is it? What does that quote mean to you, or how do you feel it? As a student athlete.
Yeah, I feel like it's a short quote, almost like a story that basically represents the entire history of the Black woman. I mean, when we were in the civil rights movement, most of the civil rights that were given were only given to men because women were still seen as property. When we had the feminist movement, it was towards white women. And then Angela Davis had to come along and create the womanist movement to incorporate Black women into that issue of feminism. So I just feel like throughout our entire history, we've never been the priority. We've never been represented properly or fairly. And I think we still see a lot of that today.
Awesome, thank you. Go ahead, someone wanted to add? Okay, well, yeah, thank you for that. I just really wanted to ask, because Coach Sumsky, you touched on a point, because when I was reading your bio in Lipscomb, yeah, they said you were the first African-American women's head coach in their D1 era to take the helm. What does it feel like, just for, again, as an African-American, just to be knocking down so many doors and setting so many trails, and being that it's 2020. Yeah, just what does that mean for you, and why has it taken so long?
It's one of those things that, I'll be honest, every time I hear it, which unfortunately this is like third position I've held in which I've heard of being either like the first Black female, or the first African-American in general, or the first female, it's just mind-boggling to me, in a sense, where I realize that is a responsibility. That's a responsibility that I'm thankful for. It's a responsibility that many other Black women ahead of me have paved the way and made possible. And I just know that I feel an ownership in the sense of representing my community and trying to find other opportunities for other women of color, of all races, just to be successful and to provide them with opportunities that I was just very fortunate to have. So I think that's just one of those things which is crazy, that I just have the ability to pass the torch. And that's what we try to do. We try to diversify our staff. We try to diversify our program. And I think it just starts with, clean up your house first, if that makes sense. And then trying to just participate in things like this, to share our stories, to continue to educate ourselves, and to continue to try to make arenas for other young Black women to follow.
Awesome. And Ms. Stevens, because I know you're going to give us some facts, because I was reading in higher ed, and it was saying that in 1990, like, women ADs have doubled. However, it went from like a 10% to just like about 19%, close to 20%. But this was, in 2017. So not sure what the most current figures are. So just enlighten me, in your particular position, what is it like knowing those figures and, moving forward?
I absolutely love that question, because like I said, I've done a lot of research in this, right? So when you're looking at those figures, be sure to outline the difference in divisions. You're going to see a lot of female athletic directors at the Division III level, and that's oftentimes because at the Division III level, you have to be a coach and an AD. And those are usually the women are the individuals who are willing to take on multiple hats. So at the D3 levels, where we see the largest amount of females in the AD seat, but that's also because they're your head basketball coach, they're your head golf coach, they're your head track and field coach, they're your head tennis coach, they're wearing multiple hats. It's as you move up, right? So you go from D3 to D2 to D1, those numbers start to dwindle down. And I think it's funny because someone mentioned that to me. I'll pull names out of this and saying, what are you talking about? We've made exuberant amount of growth. There's been so much growth in Division I athletics in terms of women having a seat at the table. And I'm reading this book and it talks about having a seat at the table. And to me, diversity is having a seat at the table. Inclusion is having a voice. And I think that's where we miss the needle a little bit on sort of these figures, right? When you're looking at the likes of Carla Williams at a UVA, that's literally the only name that most likely comes to mind when you're thinking about a female athletic director of color in Division I at an institution that anyone could name. You have to really start digging deep to looking at other institutions just to find another female athletic director of color. And most likely you're now going to go to an HBCU, right? Because that's even what a colleague of mine said, and I had to correct him real quick. He said, you could be an AD right now at an HBCU. And I had to explain, I said, first off, that's offensive. But second of all, I can be an AD at any institution in which I see fit for myself. So the issue is that those numbers sound great because of the leaps and bounds that we've taken. But when you think about when Title IX came about around in the 1970s, the position of a senior women administrator, that's what it once was specifically held by men. And it wasn't until they were trying to take hold of sort of this overarching gap of women's sports, because it wasn't under the NCAA at the time. They wanted to rein in women's sports. They wanted to oversee women's sports. They said, let's create a position for women at the table. Let's go ahead and create the appointment of the senior woman administrator. And I'll be the first person to tell you that I am completely against that appointment, because what it means for people is they believe that I only can oversee female programs, right? And most of the time, women coming up with that appointment have a background in academics, my background, student athlete services, usually the nursing, communal traits. So you'll hear the difference between agentic and communal traits. And oftentimes women are put in these communal trait positions within athletics because of our nurturing behavior, right? That's what it is. And that's why so often, more times than not, we're not given the opportunities to have a seat at the table unless I'm speaking on behalf of student athletes. I have 2 master's degrees, one of which is in business administration. I'm getting my doctorate in business administration, but I'm still the nurturing person, right? So we have to double down on ourselves in order to continue to break those barriers. And I call it the proverbial glass ceiling that currently is cracks thanks to those of Carla Williams. I keep saying her to this day because I look up to her. And that's where I struggle is, yes, we've made leaps and bounds, but that's because we started at 0. When you go from 0 to 11 in 5 years, it sounds like you're making this huge jump, but the number is still 11. And we have over 300 Division I institutions, but we have 11 female athletic directors. And that's just female, not even talking about females of color.
All right, awesome. Thank you for giving that context, because I was actually looking at the stats and I seen at the Division III level, it was like 30% of women that actually held the AD level, and then it went down to like 14% for Division II. And yeah, so wearing multiple hats, like that's very ironic that you said that. So, but Coach Sumsky, I wanted to ask you, because just from in the head coaching realm, like it's a little bit the opposite, where I was actually looking up and just doing my research, and in like the 1970s, like 90% of women accounted for head coaching roles. And now, you know, almost 50 years later, for head coaching roles in women's sports. But now in 2020, we're under half. How do you feel about that? And then secondly, I wanted to ask, just coming into your coaching, because you said like you're the trailblazer usually most places that you go. How do you feel that is when you're coming into it? Like, people looking at you, and not only are you have to be a good coach, they're looking at you since you're the first, you know, in that particular, I mean, you're the first African American in that slot. So you're holding it down for a lot of different groups. So just tell me, what do you think about that?
I like the quote that Lauren mentioned about, you know, diversity and inclusion. I think she hit it right on the head. I mean, you can be there, but as a Black woman, you don't always feel safe there. It's difficult when you look around a room and no one looks like you. And you have to just know that there's some relational gaps there that you have to try to bridge. And you have to, and sometimes you feel that you have to be more. And Lauren again double down on that with just the stats and the figures as far as like the level of education that is required. It's like you almost have to be overqualified, but you feel undersecure in a sense. And if you look at the numbers that you mentioned as far as the dwindling of female head coaches coaching women's sports, I think that's largely in part because the people that are doing the hiring are largely males. So I think women coaches have been held under a microscope, especially as of late, in particular in the ways that they address their teams and discipline their teams. And it seems that there's a gray area or a different standard in some ways in what ways that a man can discipline his team and speak to his team as opposed to a female in ways that are acceptable. Because I think as women, we are expected to be more nurturing, and we're expected to be, you know, just like loving. So anything out of the ordinary is moody and things of that nature. So as a female, just as a female, we have to worry about those, you know, misconceptions, and we have to think twice even before addressing people who don't have that relationship with us and don't know who we are, and realize that we're representing women as a whole. And then as far as being a Black female, it's that microscope is even smaller. I believe that in our league, as far as women's basketball coaches, we have 3 African-American coaches in our league that I can just think of off top. And I'm the only female. And again, it's 2020. And if you look across the league and the diversity in it, it's just not representative. So it's wearing a lot of hats all the time. It's always being aware of how, you know, you're expected to behave in some senses, but then also just try to be authentic and genuine to who you are and what got you, you know, that opportunity to begin with. So it's just us going and knocking down those glass ceilings, trying to show other women that, you know, they can have these opportunities, other women of color, that, you know, there's someone there who relates to exactly where they are. And I think that what I've been most impressed by is in the coaching community as a whole. I can't speak to the, you know, athletic community, athletic director, you know, community, but coaches have been so welcoming, especially coaches of color, as far as coming together and trying to rally around one another, to support one another in a very authentic and genuine way. And that means a lot to me, because I mean, even beyond all these things, I believe I'm the youngest Division I head coach in the country too. So it's knowing that there are a lot of microscopes, there's you know, a lot of eyes on you, but just being thankful and then just trying to continue to press on and create those opportunities for sure. So sorry to beat a dead horse, but I just truly believe it's creating more opportunities and being visible in a way that you can encourage other young women to see that they can one day be where you are.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that. And Tasia, Ms. Jeffries, I definitely wanted to speak with you. Yeah, because we were speaking, Angela Davis, dropping references. So I'm excited to hear your viewpoints on the subject matter. But one thing I did want to touch on, and I wanted to ask you all, but we'll start with Ms. Jeffries, because I know at Bellarmine, like, you guys are pretty much on the ground, because during the entire Breonna Taylor incident, you know, it took place in. So I wanted to ask you, just going back to that time period, because I actually heard about it late. I heard about it after George Floyd. I heard about it after Ahmaud Arbery. So when the whole Protect Black Women came about, and people started being more vocal about it after Toyin Salou and her death in Tallahassee, Florida, I was like, what do you mean, like, protect Black women? Like, I understand it, but I'm like, you know, there was someone standing up for her, like, at that particular incident, and, you know, out here marching for all 3 of them. And someone, like a female friend of mine, she told me, she was like, you know, people don't keep that same energy for women. And it usually takes like, it didn't happen until these two other incidents happened. So I wanted to ask you just, what was everything on the ground? Because I believe that incident happened in March, and it wasn't until like May or June that actually protests and things started to happen. What was it like in Louisville?
Yeah, well, when it first happened, you saw things like flyers and social media posts that were made, like trying to shed light on the issue, kind of like calling out the primary media outlets for not shedding any light on it or not making it a story. And then, like you said, with everything with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, with all of them, when that happened, it kind of became like a snowball effect. Like then it turned into let's bring justice for all, um, or even let's bring justice for George Floyd specifically. And then they found out about Breonna Taylor, but there was nobody in the beginning to say let's bring justice to Breonna Taylor, at least not from a position of power or a position of leadership or a position of influence. So I think that is what they kind of mean when they, whoever you were talking to, said that people don't come with that same energy. Because when we saw the video of what happened to George Floyd, everybody was immediately outraged. It was immediate protest, but we didn't get that for Breonna Taylor.
All right. So the protest on the ground really didn't start to happen until after like the other two incidents, is what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, there was small protests, but the large scale ones that you saw on TV with hundreds and thousands of people and people coming in from different states, that didn't start until the other incidents.
Okay. And just at the campus level, has there been any talks or any demonstrations or anything at that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Bellarmine has done a pretty good job as far as not shying away from talking about it. We have a really, really good Black Student Union and diversity. What's it called? It's like a diversity and inclusion office, but there's another word for it too. We have great leaders in both of those organizations, and they have helped a lot with like the other leaders in the school building to come up with different events to handle or to host and come up with different conversations to have. So I feel like Bellarmine has done a good job of trying to have those conversations. And then as far as like my specific team goes, we've had several discussions about the incident and about all of the protests. And with the particular school that I go to a private Catholic institution, and those are traditionally majority white. So I find myself as a Black woman having to educate a lot. So a lot of the conversations in the beginning was kind of educating my non-people of color counterparts on what's going on, why it's going on, the history of it, like all of that, so they can then understand and become allies.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. And I just wanted to open that conversation up because I know that just, you know, in the middle of the pandemic and as social inequality as the subject gained traction, I know that we've had to have conversation about it in some standpoint. So I wanted to know, what have you guys spoke about just on campuses with your teams, with your student athletes?
Was that question directed at me specifically? You kind of went out at the beginning, so I may have missed it.
Oh, my fault. Yeah, I just wanted to know, yeah, with your team, like, what have some of the discussions been? Yeah, if you can definitely answer that.
Of course. We've never shied away from race conversations. My husband is white, I'm Black. We work on the same staff. So race has been a large part of who I am and introducing who I am to, you know, my team and program. And Honestly, those conversations at first are always difficult because, like Tasia said, there is a lot of educating that goes on. There's a lot of answering questions, but we're really thankful that, our teams are willing to participate and have those questions. So I'm really grateful to say that our team been having lots and lots of race conversations before. Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. And obviously during quarantine, we joke on our team that we just have time right now. Like, we have time and everyone's at home, and we got a chance to dive into those conversations a bit deeper than we probably would have if we'd been just in a normal summer schedule, summer routine. But it was really enlightening in a sense to see that even after having been together for a little bit over a year, having those conversations where the gaps still were, and then trying to cover those gaps. And then, as Tasia said, as some of my players, obviously grabbed a hold to these issues for the first time after visibly and tangibly seeing some evidence that really spoke to them in a way through the protests and, just becoming more engaged and involved with the Black community. We even had a player who stepped up and decided to lead the Black Student Union. And our program is actually the president of that, and she's actually looking into some more initiatives as far as even creating a Black Student Alliance, or Student Athlete Alliance, in our department. So it was really cool to see, even after being a year of just constant, conversations in education where there were still some gaps, but then having time to try to work through those gaps and fill some of those gaps, and then seeing, our team step up in some really, really positive ways to continue that education. And what I most appreciated is the education that a lot of my players were able to share with their parents, because usually on college campuses, most students are, privy to different experiences and different, backgrounds, and it's all about learning and soaking things in. But when you get to, their parents or their grandparents who are far removed from most education or anything of that nature, for them to be able to go and try to make a difference in their homes and their local communities, really, really, really spoke to me in a way that I was really grateful for. I'm grateful to, have that opportunity. Obviously, Lipscomb is incredibly supportive of all of those initiatives. Our athletic department, top, bottom, has been fantastic. Our president stepped up in some really special ways too. So I'm really thankful for that. And I think what made the most impact on me too, outside of things happening in our own little community, was I think the WNBA did a fantastic job of really, really, really just standing up as a league in a unified way, as obviously a majority Black league, and a majority athletes of color in general. They just really wrapped their arms around each other in a really national way, and I think they did the most with their platform. And I think that really encouraged a lot of teams and programs to continue those steps that obviously translated to the NBA and other leagues.
Thank you. And let's see if there's anything you want to add.
I'll just add two things. Candace Story-Lee, right there at Vandy, she said that we're dealing with 4 pandemics right now. We're dealing with Title IX, and as of August, we now have a new approach to how we have to take Title IX on our campuses. We're dealing with race and social injustice. We're dealing with the implications of COVID. And then finally, we're dealing with an economic downturn where we had a recession looking to be 3 years out, but it's here now, right? You're dealing with 4 pandemics on your campus. And the issue right now, which is so unfortunate, is not too many people are able to address all 4 pandemics, right? You have groups of individuals on each campus able to speak to and maybe compartmentalize each one. But I genuinely see it across the board, where race and social injustice to me serves as the foundation for all of them, right? Think about in which the backbone the country was built upon. African Americans, right? So I see the direct connection to Title IX as we support women. I see the direct connection to COVID as Black people in the Black community are dying at higher rates than any other community. I see a direct connection to race and social injustice. So to me, when we talk about things that people could be doing on campus, right? So our student athletes took an initiative that came to me, and they created the Board of Diversity Awareness. They wanted to be very specific and not saying Black. They did a poll only because of the fact that we have a lot of different students on our campus, and they asked, in order to feel welcome, what's the best way that we can bring you all to the table? So our Board of Diversity Awareness that kicked off their first program this past fall, in which case we had PhD faculty on campus. We had PhD faculty from our campus. We had a CEO of a Fortune 50 company speak. And then we had Tanika Hughes, who works for Action News Jax down the street, on our call. We did breakout sessions, and we had over 200 student athletes present for a non-required program. And that's because, to me, it was a student-driven initiative. You speak about, and I think, Lauren, you said this, Coach, where you said, our students have a voice. Tasia, you have a voice that at one point, 10 years ago, 5 years ago even, people were not hearing. So now it's the students who are able to drive the mission of the institution. I think that speaks volumes to sort of, and unfortunately, the pressures that we're now able to speak to a little bit more for our student athletes of color. And we've been able to do that here at JU. We brought them on to our Diversity and Inclusion Council on campus. They're included in sort of every President's Council meeting now. It's now a permanent position on our SAC executive board, now the chair of the Board of Diversity Awareness. And it's really kicking off. It's much more than a patch that the NCAA sends out, right? Like it's much more than that. And hearing how each campus is sort of doing their own initiative, it helps me. I don't want to use the word cope, but it makes me feel a lot better because, as you know, as the leader of the COVID committee, as the deputy Title IX coordinator, as the leader of our social justice committee, as the person who's working with budgets for our department, it's good to see that other campuses are taking initiatives and figuring out ways to not really compartmentalize these issues, but making sure that they're not found to be mutually exclusive.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I know just within the ASUN conference, because I remember shortly after the George Floyd incident, like we had a conversation just on a conference call. It was just a normal conference call. And actually our commissioner just opened it up and he wanted to know how we felt. And I just felt that that was interesting because in my many travels in a lot of my jobs, like that has never come up at any meeting. Like we may talk about it in a little corner or we may talk about it at the water cooler and it may be like a quiet conversation, but yeah, it was just something that he actually stepped up and he wanted to address. So I really felt comfortable because, you know, we actually spoke and it was just one of those things where I was saying, you know, like we're not okay at this particular moment because there's a lot of things that happen in America and you see what's going on and you just feel a certain way about it. Like the Breonna Taylor incident, it reminded me a lot of like the Fred Hampton incident that happened like during the 70s and like some of our feelings about law enforcement and just not fully trusting them. Like I was watching Trial 4 on Netflix and that just totally blew my mind, just the injustice that he received. So Tasia, I wanted to ask you just, and because I know you're a senior this year and you've had to educate a lot of people, I wanted to ask you just going forward, what are some things that you wanted to see just from improvement just in college sports as far as you as an African-American woman? What are some things that you wanted to see going forward?
I think that the biggest thing that I want to see is for the allies of the Black community to do their own educating. I feel like when we're in the middle of a pandemic and during the entire pandemic, you see nothing but COVID news or protest news. When you turn on the TV, ignorance is no longer an excuse. I feel like the burden of educating should not be put on the Black community because they're the one who's having to deal with the issues that they're explaining. So I feel like if people really would want to help, we can cut out that education part and go straight to fixing the issue if they do their part from the very beginning.
Gotcha. Anybody want to add to that?
I think it's awesome that you said that, right? What you're speaking to is the Black tax. We talk about it all the time in higher ed. It's called the Black tax. And I wanted to ask you, Tasia, how tired did you feel as a student athlete of color, sort of being the educator in college, right? Like you're 18 to 22 years old and you have to educate probably even some adults. How did it make you feel?
At first, like, I really wasn't thinking too much about it until we get into like the fourth conversation or the fifth conversation. And they're all different groups, but I find myself saying the same thing over and over. And I constantly hear people saying they never knew that, or somebody's 40 or 50 years old saying that they've never seen civil rights issues before. Like, I find that very hard to believe. Um, so once we got longer down the road and further down the road, um, it did become very tiring. And I felt like I was also moving into a very dangerous position where people were viewing me as the voice for all Black people. And it's like, just because this is how I view things and this is how I would want to see it fixed, like, that doesn't mean that every Black person thinks the way that I do. So you can't come to me looking for excuses or explanations of another Black person's behavior, because I can't give that. I'm not them. So that got very tiring, and I was trying to kind of like educate, but not come off like I'm the knower of all Black things, because I'm not. So it's a very thin line that you have to walk on, and it's very tiring to do that.
All right, anyone wanted to add on that? Because I actually felt that when you said that, like, pretty much you're becoming the spokesperson for all Black things. Like, I definitely understand that, and I know where you're coming from. Coach Sumsky, anything you wanted to speak on?
Yeah, Tasia, I think you hit it right on the head. I think you spoke it very eloquently as well. I mean, I think that's the burden that us Black women have been carrying for so long, in the sense of we've kind of grown used to being, seen and not necessarily heard. And now everyone all of a sudden wants to hear from you. And you're like, I'm trying to figure out how I feel right now. So, I mean, I don't know what you want me to tell you in any way, shape, or form. And while I'm grateful that these conversations are happening, so much of me is crazy. I look around and I FaceTime my 90-year-old grandmother, because she has an iPad. And I think, like, she never got to participate in these conversations at all. Like this doesn't make sense to her. I mean, she's lived her life in a way of knowing that at times she felt that her life was, could be gone at any moment. During this time, I even got pulled over, don't tell my boss. And I was scared for my life, like, seriously. And I grew up, I'm the stepdaughter of a career police officer, and still mortified. And it was the nicest guy, the nicest officer. But no matter what position you hold as a Black woman, no matter what you do, no matter the community that you're in or around you, when you're out in public and you feel like just another Black woman. And what I mean by that is you feel expendable. In a sense. And so going from that to, okay, let me educate you on these however many years of my life experience that solely I have, the lines that only I've walked, the experiences that only I've had, to try to put those into words in a way to bring light, it will become exhausting. It can, if you let it. So again, thankful to have had those conversations, thankful that those conversations are still going on, thankful to even see the changes in those conversations. But there was a time when it was hard. It was just hard this summer. But I'm thankful that a lot of these other leagues are stepping up, and thankful that you guys are even continuing to have these conversations and give voices to Black women who typically are just expected to be Black women over in the corner somewhere. So I think this is great. I think that you guys are making a difference with one person at a time, but I think that just it's been a lot. So but anyway, Tasia, I think you hit it right on the head, because I was speaking to some of my athletes and they were exhausted. Like they were exhausted by the conversations. Like they were like, look, coach, can we just talk about anything else, like, right now? And there were times where I felt it too, for sure. But, thankful to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think you student athletes, Tasia, now your generation, like, y'all aren't scared. I love it. Y'all speak up. Y'all speak your mind. Y'all stand for what you believe in. Y'all making differences. no matter how small, but those things are starting to really magnify themselves. And you guys have a lot more courage than my generation did, and we're not too much older. We kind of just fell in line a little bit, where you guys are really standing up and making real change. And that's one of those things that you may not even appreciate right now, Tasia, because you're kind of in the middle of it. But on down the line, I think you'll be able to, really look back and see the changes that you made in your community that will seriously make a huge difference. So I encourage you to keep on keeping on, keep hanging in there for sure. And then Lauren, you're doing all kinds of amazing things, and your name is awesome. But you guys keep on. So for sure, that's all I got. I'll end it there.
Okay, well, my last question, because I was actually doing my research, and Ms. Davis, I seen something that you had said actually in a video. It was like a blog on YouTube that I thought was really, really awesome. And it was something I wanted to touch on because just looking at, like it was a few months back, I watched Hate You Give. It was HBO on demand. And, I tend to do that when I'm getting work done. But I was watching that and it really got me. It was emotional. I teared up a little bit because just for someone that young at that age, what she had to go through and educate people that were her senior on a subject matter and what it meant to her, it just meant a lot just to be going through certain things at that particular time. But Ms. Davis, I wanted to touch on something you had said, and it was actually something that your softball teammate gave to you in plaque, and it was the phrase, it's somewhere there, I think so, because I think you were around the same place when it happened, but they said, empower women, empower women. I wanted to know, what does that mean to you? And how do you exude that phrase, or how do you live that phrase?
I love that gift. I was pointing out, my students I'm going to be the old lady that has way too much stuff in her office because I'm a hoarder. I keep way too much stuff. When people give me something like, oh, I think I can fit it on the shelf, it's up there, it's a plaque, and it's empowered women, empower women. I think I have it on about 10 different shirts. I say it all the time because I'm going to quote Minda Harts again. She said, there's power and beauty in seeing what you can become. Representation matters when you're historically the one not represented. And I'll try not to tear up. Kamala Harris being the VP elect, and I tell people this all the time, I don't care if it would have been Republican, Democrat, non-bipartisan, I do not care where you stand on this. That means something. We are in 2020, and we're talking about the first female in the White House, the first minority female in the White House. She has so many firsts in 2020, sort of what Coach said. And I dial back to say, when I hear empowered women, empower women, I do a We Lead program at JU for student athletes where I talk with female student athletes about things that I've gone through in my life. Because so often you see the strong Black woman in the office that wears heels and has to wear a full suit, and usually my hair is pulled back, right? And I have to be so tight all the time for them. And I had to sit back and really break down, and I express things to them because I'm quite open about it with my student athletes. I have clinically diagnosed OCD, anxiety, and depression. I'm very open about it, right? Like, I have to take medicine in order to manage it. If I don't take it for 4 days, my fiance, who is white, by the way, we laugh about this, so we have racial conversations in our household too. He'll say, Lauren, I'm gonna need you to go handle that right now, right? Like, so I understand where I am, and I understand the platform that I've been given at a school like Jacksonville University, where our population is just over 4,000, right? The majority of our applicants are Black. However, the majority of our students are white. The majority of our faculty are white. The majority of our administrative and staff are white. I'm the only Black female in athletic administration. And to go to your point, Lauren, people hire who they know and what they know. My athletic director, Alex Gilbert, phenomenal. He did not hire me. I was actually hired by a Black female, right? So we haven't hired any other Black women sort of under the leadership that we have right now. And when I hear empowered women, empower women, this book speaks to it already in the memo where it's saying, I'm not worried about my seat. Like, I have a seat at the table. I am probably the most outspoken person on those AD calls where I'm usually taught, I lie to you not, they don't ask the SWA questions. They do not. We're not allowed to vote. We don't get to have a voice. I'm like texting my responses. I'm perfectly fine with this being recorded. I'm open about it. I text my responses to Alex so he can speak up on my behalf and speak up for the people. And I literally say, I'm like, we have to do better. I'm not sitting here now doing this call to promote myself, right? I think my shirt is an RBG shirt that literally it says, women belong in every room where decisions are being made. I'm doing this for the Tasias of the world, the Shalonda Neely's of the world from our team, even the Laurens of the world who maybe one day she doesn't want to be a coach, she wants to transition into administration. So I believe it's my job, Black, white, Puerto Rican, Chinese, Asian, to empower young women. That is my why. I work with men's basketball and women's basketball mainly because they're marginalized groups on this campus who have a story that no one else understands but me, and that's because of the upbringing I had. So that's why I love working with men's and women's basketball. I worked with football when I was at an R1 at University of Maryland. I work with football. I work at track and field. I'm very particular with the teams that I work with for a reason. But there's something to be said about women and the need to have a voice. And I tell people this all the time. I believe I was put on this earth to speak up for the people who are voiceless or feel like they do not have one. So my softball student athletes brought that to me because we did a little session with softball. I've done it with women's lacrosse. I do women's basketball. They're probably so tired of me. We have to do growth sessions every 2 weeks, plus their hearts. But my goal in life is to hopefully just give them nuggets of wisdom so they can maybe not trip over something or an obstacle that I've had to trip over, because no one did it for me. Right? Like, there was no one in front of me leading the way. Even today, I get so frustrated, and this book talks about it in the memo. I keep referencing, it's a great book. It says that the majority of the people who have given men to hearts the opportunities are white men. Not Black women, not women, white men. And I think there's something to be said. Booker T. Washington talks about crabs in a barrel. I think we're so busy fighting each other that we forget that we're all in this together. And we as women will not be successful until we can recognize that. And that's what I speak to when I talk about empowered women. I'm already there. I feel empowered. I have a voice. I'm direct. You ask me a question, I don't think I can tell a lie. It's not my fault. I prayed on it. God delivered. Can't tell a lie. And now it's to the point where it's time for me to help empower those other people to have a voice. And that's sort of what I do with every single one of our teams. Our student athletes, Tasia, I kid you not, they said, well, maybe we can just write letters to people about our experiences. And I, excuse my language, to hell with that. You have a voice. Your voice matters. Let's create a platform for you all. And I think they really took it, and they took leaps and bounds with it. But empower women, I believe it. We Lead is my program. I Lie to You Not. It's women's empowerment through leadership, education, altruism, and development. I think those are the 4 pillars of excellence that we have to stick to as women. I don't care which color it is, as women, so we continue to build and grow together, so we can go from the 4% in Fortune 500 companies to the majority, in which we're so deserving of and so earning of, not only because of the work that we've done to get here, but the education that goes along with it.
Thank you. Very well said. And Tasia, I'm gonna close it out with you because I definitely wanted to ask you, because I know in 2008 when Barack Obama won presidency, it was just coming up in grade school and everything. They were like, anybody, you can be the next president. But, when you look at the list of presidents, you don't see anyone that identifies with you. So in 2008, it was just almost like a crowning achievement. Yes. Now anything can happen. There's nothing on the table. What does the vice president or Kamala Harris being elected to vice president, what does that mean to you just in 2020?
Well, just going back to 2008, like you said, in 2008, I was 9 years old. I was in about 3rd or 4th grade. And I remember having a discussion of first Black president, yay. And I remember, to this day, I remember there was a girl in my class and she was like, yeah, we've had a Black president, but we still haven't had a girl president. Because they were telling all of us, you can do whatever you want. You can be president. She was like, nuh-uh, because a girl hasn't yet. And I'm like, that has always stuck with me. And like, while I didn't necessarily agree, like I saw where she was coming from. So seeing her today in 2020, seeing Kamala Harris be the vice president, I think she opened a lot of doors. But I also don't want to like skip over the people that came before her. Like we had Hillary Clinton, who was like the first female candidate that like actually like had a chance to win. Like I feel like if we didn't see Hillary run in the previous election, then we wouldn't see Kamala on the ticket with Joe Biden. Like I don't think that would have happened at all. So I think it's a slow progression. Started with the first Black president, then we get the first candidate, now we got the first female vice president. So I think it's a slow progression, but I feel like it is steady and it is at least consistent now. And I feel like we are also more focused on keeping it consistent. So seeing her being in office now or about to be in office, like I think it's very motivating. It's inspiring. I feel like what Miss Lauren said, I feel like no matter what party she's a part of, like you can't be a woman and not be proud of that. It's huge. So yeah, that's really all I can say is that it's very inspiring, and I'm so glad that she got to do it, and I think she's gonna do a good job. So I can't wait for these next 4 years.
Crazy. Yeah, I wanted to close out on that note because I want to be respectful for your time. I know you have places to be, and I thank you for taking the time out and speaking with me regarding the subject matter. So unless anyone has anything to close out, anyone has anything they want to say, go ahead.
I teach people this lean in. I want everyone to remember though, Tasia, you remember this. Kamala has opened the door for the VP seat, which is still just the SWA. We still have so much work to do to get that AD presidential chair. I think that's where we have to stay focused. And I'm telling student athletes this all the time. It's way more than just being the VP. It's way more than just being the SWA. Shoot, it could be way more than being the AD. You have to shoot high. And you have to make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who are, like I tell my boys, about that life.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for taking the time out. And this has been ASUN Teammates. It's a segment that we do. We just wanted to keep the conversation alive. We didn't want anything to just over time, just wane. So thank you guys for taking the time out and sharing with me, because I know there's a lot of things that you shared that you didn't necessarily have to. So I thank you for doing that, and I look forward to this women's basketball season. Coach Sumsky, Tasia, welcome to the ASUN conference. I'm looking forward to see you put in some work. So yes,
you will see it.
I'm going to say no offense now when you hear me yelling on the sidelines. No offense. No offense. We're friends.
All right. It's all right. It's all right. You're going to hear a few words from me as well. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, November 25th. But again, this has been another ASUN Teammate. So thank you guys for joining with me on the discussion, and I look forward to the rest of this year. All right?
All right. Nice meeting you.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you guys.